Mr. Deputy Speaker, global Britain can only be built on the foundation of sound public finances. And that is why, for me, one number above all in the budget stood out: that next year our debt percentage will start falling, and finally we can see through to the time that the country will stop borrowing and live within its means again. Fiscal responsibility is not just an ideological pursuit. Without a prudent approach to borrowing and debt, ordinary people pay the price. They pay it through slower growth, less fiscal resilience, and interest rates that will begin to climb. Starting with growth. As government borrowing grows, it crowds out the lending available to British businesses to expand and invest. And the results around the world are clear. On average, economies with debt exceeding 90% of GDP grow 1 percentage point slower than those where it is between 30 and 90%, and 2 percentage points slower than those where it is below 30%. If it were not for the actions of this government, our nation's debt would have already spiralled well beyond 90%. And although a 1% hit to growth doesn't sound like a lot...
Code.
Error.
King, I'm working off the... Sorry.
The hit to growth would be £100 billion in GDP and £40 billion to the Treasury's coffers. But if the argument on lower growth wasn't enough, higher borrowing has other costs too. Unless we build resilience in public finances, the economy will not have the flexibility to respond to future economic slowdowns. The consequences could be severe. Italy entered its recession with debt at 100% of GDP, and since then its defence budget has been cut by 12%. Portugal's debt, 70% of GDP. In the last 5 years, education cut by 16%. And then there is Greece. Debt at 100% of GDP, and the result, a health budget cut in half. Here in Britain, we are investing record amounts in schools, in our military, our NHS. And if we do not get debt under control now, while the economy is growing, they won't be able to maintain this record when the going gets tough again. And lastly, I turn to interest rates. In modern times, the average 10-year gilt yield has been 5%. 4 times higher what we are currently paying to borrow, and this situation will not last forever. Also, the more we borrow, the less confidence markets might have in our ability to repay, and the faster those rate rises will come. We already spend more on debt interest than we do on the police and our armed forces combined. And as our interest rates rise, that means less for schools, for hospitals, and for welfare. But it isn't only the government that pays when rates go up, it's ordinary people with their mortgages, their credit cards, their bank loans. A 1-point hit means £1,000 on mortgages a year. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is a disciplined budget delivered by a Chancellor that believes in the importance of fiscal responsibility, and I commend it to the House.